Mrs. K had the dream of having a world-class performing arts center here in Kansas City. Unfortunately, she left us way too early, so it was left to Julia to determine whether that dream could be translated into reality.
My parents, in hindsight, were so exciting. I was so privileged and so lucky to live with both of them. They both created their own excitement. He had his own with baseball. She loved the arts, and my mother leaving me in charge of her foundation with just one sentence as a guidance. She said, build a performing arts center.
It was an important time for the community when Julia decided she wanted to embark on a journey to, number one, first see if it's feasible. Did the community really want it? And if so, what should it look like?
In some ways, I would say performing arts centers are harbingers of a thriving downtown. That's what Muriel McBrien Kauffman knew. She was already starting to see how it did help communities expand even further, make people feel like they could come together.
The arts are absolutely essential to having a stable city, a city that offers more than just sports, more than just money, but something that actually does something good for the soul.
We did our homework and we traveled. We looked at other performing arts centers and had behind-the-scenes tours, and they were very open with us as far as what they were happy they had done and what they regretted that they had not done, so that we could hopefully not make those same mistakes.
We began looking at sites, and after balls, I'd go around and look at the sites late at night because I'd have a babysitter because I still had young ones at home, and B, there was no crowds on the street. I loved the site we're on here. It had a beautiful parking lot. You could look south to the city, and that was the way I chose it, in an evening gown late at night, about 11 o'clock.
The first thing I do is try and understand the city and the site in relationship to the city. And we had lunch and we talked about the site, and I started sketching, and there was a piece of, I'm not sure it was a napkin or a piece of paper, and I started doodling, and I said, it can't turn its back on downtown, so we'll have to make a design whose back is as inviting as its front. And I doodled something that looked quite sculptural, and I think Julia was fascinated. I think that kind of locked it in. That was it, but it was just the beginning of a very long journey. I think that the greatest decision Julia made, before we even came in, is that there should be two halls: the proscenium, theater, opera, ballet, and the concert hall. And that's a profound decision, because when you try to do one hall that does all, you compromise. And some thoughts came to me immediately, like, you got to create one lobby for this. You should not split it into separate. The life of what goes on in one and the other, the intermissions, the kind of pre-theater times should be merged. That'll bring the community together. It'll be the sum total greater than the parts. And then there were moments of doubt about resources. Can we do all of that? And at some point, Julia said, let's change course.
It was about $426 million that needed to be raised, and it was primarily private dollars. You know, who you could tap, who had an interest in the arts. It just so happened our broad community is extremely philanthropic.
I've never seen in almost any other place that I've been to the kind of reinvestment in the community by people, not just with their wealth, but with their wisdom, with their work, and with their allegiance, to want to make this a permanently improving place for the next generations. That's really incredibly rare.
And happily, at some point, fundraising improved, and Julia got the courage and she said, no, we're going for the original scheme.
Julia's the first to give her mother all the credit. The total project would never have been possible without the enormous generosity of the Muriel McBrien Kauffman Family Foundation. It provided nearly half of the total funding requirements, with the next highest contribution being the city of Kansas City to build the Arts District parking garage.
This isn't the type of building that people were used to seeing in Kansas City. I mean, it totally broke the mold in terms of architecture, in terms of scope, in terms of financing, in terms of what it planned to be and what it was going to be. So I looked at this as one of those rocket ship type things that would blast this into a different stratosphere.
It is still a marvel to see that great lobby enclosed with glass, where you sense the seasons, where you sense the changing weather, where you can see a sunset. Light is a kind of a life ingredient that we need to be very judicious in providing as architects.
One of the things that the construction project showed many people is that vibrations that come out of sounds are a really big deal. So before we started seeing the walls, it became very clear that there were really 3 buildings and they were not touching each other. But the purity of the sound wins, and the purity of the performance wins in these 2 halls.
By the time we were working with Yasu, it was quite advanced technologically. We built a very large 1:10 model of the hall with all the sensors, and they were tested and measured. We were making adjustments to the scheme in response to these simulations. The architect and the acoustician are waltzing, and they go step by step, and you respond to one step, and it's just back and forth.
It's critical that you have the venue designed for the artists that will be performing in them. You have Muriel Kauffman Theater, where it's home for, obviously, the ballet. It's for Broadway musicals. You have Hellsberg Hall, which is built 100% for unamplified sound.
This is one of the top organs in the world, both for what it is and the acoustic in which it sits. I first knew of it as a sketch on paper. I had a meeting with Jane Chu, who was the CEO then. We were talking about possibilities of organ programming, but she said, the organ has just arrived, would you like to go to Hellsberg Hall and just see it? And it was all in pieces on the stage, and just couldn't wait until all the pieces got put together and we got to actually hear it. I remember the trip up to the organ, because this is a very unique organ in that way, that you ride an elevator and then you actually walk through the organ in order to play it. You can't help but notice the artistry that preceded you in that moment.
I mean, I was blown away that night because it was so well done. I mean, there's parties and parties. That was one hell of a party.
I was emotional because of Julia, just because I knew how much this meant to her and how much I know it would have meant to Mrs. K and to Mr. K. And you could sense, you could feel, you could even hear the pride that people had in this magnificent facility being open. And the encouraging thing is that enthusiasm, that pride, that energy is still with us 10 years later.
Sunday, there was an open house for the public, and there were 55,000 people who came. And Julia stood at the top of the stairs and shook hands with as many people as she could shake the hand of.
I had to do what you and Kauffman would do, and Muriel, was greet the public. Do you remember seeing pictures of him standing at the ballpark greeting the people coming in? Well, that's what he would have done.
If it's a new production, that could be 18 months to 2 years beforehand that we're planning designs, and we design a production to fit this theater. Every inch is used. When it comes to dance, it's about the stage. We have to have a great stage, and that's what we have here. And it was done right when it was built. They thought about that.
We frequently build sets. We just built a set for the Steve Jobs production that we're doing, and it's going to 2 other theaters. So when it's designed and when it's built, it's very important to consider that. So a lot of planning, a lot of planning. It's also made so many lists, national and international, of the best houses, the most architecturally interested in one of the finest performing arts centers in the world. The ability to perform here is something that all of the artists that we engage talk about, brag about, and can't wait to come back to.
It does involve so many moving parts. The logistics of everything are incredible. Once the artist selection is made, from there, whether it's marketing, operational, getting the stage set up with the exact right equipment down, to specifications that are beyond my pay grade on the technical side of that. It's an incredible undertaking, but the end result is something that's just beautiful for the eyes, the ears, all the senses to take in.
To bring world-class works to Kansas City audiences and to frame it inside this magnificent place, it's all comes together so beautifully in the end.
To experience music here at the Kauffman Center, you get a chance to hear the music the way the music was meant to be heard, with the clarity and the warmth and the depth and the definition that makes things so visceral.
And so what really makes this space unique is that you see the people and you hear them playing the sound. How a space sounds and what kinds of music that we can build in that space is really important to me. I think that a room is actually your main collaborator, not the musicians on stage. It's the room you're in. And some of the most immaculate music in the wrong room can become cacophony. So to be able to perform as a singer and as a harpist in this space was incredible.
You know, when I was a kid, we didn't have this place, but I thought about, God, if I can play at Municipal Auditorium or the Music Hall. And now we've got this Kauffman Center to be able to communicate on a very intricate, nuanced level with the audience. The way it feels, the air, the everything. And that's what live theater is able to present to the audience. It's something that you can't capture on a video or record, but when you're there, it's alive, you know.
I remember when Yo-Yo Ma came, and Yo-Yo had his classes for students here. He's very big into music education. And I was amazed by that. But then I found out there are a whole lot of people who do that when they come into town. They give back to the youth of this community. And the Kauffman Center has done a fantastic job of reaching out to the underserved communities. I remember coming here to see Boys to Men 4 times in a row. The last time I brought a couple of kids, and I was amazed. High school juniors, both of them, had never been to the Kauffman Center. So having an opportunity to show this off to them, they were in gaga. They had no idea this was here or what it was about. So the idea of reaching out to the entire community and making this known and spreading arts education around, it's huge.
The handprint wall, the grandparents getting involved because they knew that their grandkids could have their handprint on for the future generations, because that's one of the things the board really stressed is this Performing Arts Center is great for now, but it's also for the next generations.
All 3 high schools, choir, band, and orchestra had the opportunity to play here and not only raise money for the Kauffman Center, but raise money for the schools. The Kauffman Center isn't just for world-renowned artists. And I remember being backstage, and there was this energy that everyone was so excited to be there and be able to play. The bass section had a feature, and it was pizzicato, so it just resonated through the entire hall, and it was one of the coolest moments of my life.
What truly makes it special? How you're treated by those interaction of the people who greet you, meet you, and say goodbye to you when you leave.
Oh, the volunteer program is wonderful. And that came from when I went to the Broward Center in Florida. And it made me think, we need to do this. And it's been so successful. It's amazing that they put in this kind of time with us. But we love it and we appreciate them because they're the people that help make it successful.
But it's also become a gathering place for corporate activities, a gathering place for people who want to have a service for a loved one. It has become what I like to call a special place.
It works because there's a sense of ceremony and pleasure and joy in the act of coming to the performance.
You've created an entire system in the community where people feel like they can belong in their own ways.
It's changed the skyline of our community, not just literally, but figuratively.
You're either changing or you're failing. You have to keep moving forward. This was a huge step forward.
And so the fact that it worked out so incredibly well, I think is kind of a miracle. It's a miracle. And it's one that I think all of us are grateful for every day.
It's not difficult to get chills.
I keep using the word magical, and this is a magical space.
Live performance, especially in places that are designed to hold them, they can change the world, and they have changed the world. There's no reason why, within our generation, within our means, within our city, that we can't also make history as well.